so that I could welcome you all back to our live streaming sessions of Kingdom Hearts Final Mix as part of the HD compilation released for PlayStation 4. It is so wonderful to see we actually have like a pretty decent little audience this morning. Really quickly, if any of you out there have access to the chat or anything like that, could you tell me how our audio levels are sounding? Because we had an issue with that yesterday that I wasn't able to find out about until after the fact. I think I've made it to where my mic should pretty easily distinguish itself from the sound mixing for the game, but we may still have issues. So, if we do, just please let me know and we'll sort that out in short order. Okay, so, if you'll recall, when last we left off, we were right here in Wonderland, the third official world we've paid a visit to in Kingdom Hearts, and the first proper Disney world. Now, we had a battle of sorts with the Queen of Hearts and her entourage, after which Alice was kidnapped from the prison cage she was being held in by the deck of cards. So, we have to now beat the Queen's guards to Alice and the Heartless location so that hopefully we can rescue her. And if you'll recall, that boulder was actually blocking our path earlier on during last night's session, and so now we'll have access to a brand new area. Okay, so now the Cheshire Cat has somewhat informally introduced us to what'll end up being the primary mechanic for the remainder of our time in Wonderland. That being constant trips through the Bazaar Room. Oftentimes from different angles. We'll end up in that room when it's totally inverted, we'll end up walking off walls, all of this as we attempt to track Alice down. Okay, somebody says audio is sounding much better. Thank you, that is wonderful. Exactly what we're looking for. Also, we missed the introduction of a new enemy when we first loaded into this zone, that being the large body, the somewhat rotund fellow who accompanied that first wave of shadows and soldiers. They, along with the shadows and soldiers, kind of form the trifecta of iconic Kingdom Hearts enemies. The large body is powerful, of course, but rather sluggish, and can only be attacked from the rear or with magic. So you could blast it in the face with a fireball, although I don't know why you would waste an MP charge. They're not much of a threat, despite supposedly being the big bruisers of the Heartless line at this point. In fact, a stray Nocturne can cause way more damage, in my opinion. Oh, as you'll see, we actually managed to reflect their fire just as soon as they shut it off. And that's why we love the Blizzard spell, y'all. One cast took out, I think, all 3 or 4 soldiers at once. Blizzard was much better in Kingdom Hearts 1 than in KH2. A lot of the spells, the basic spells especially, get a bit of a boost in power for Kingdom Hearts 2, but actually, like, pulling them off and connecting with enemies is typically made a bit more difficult in that game. Here, you can pretty much just fire and forget anything, but it often doesn't do that much damage. Now, of course, it is New Year's Eve as we record this, so I hope everybody's having a wonderful holiday season and is ready to progress boldly onward into the brand new year, and hopefully have a very productive and pleasant new year. How's everybody doing out there? Anything special planned for the holiday? Okay, so this is the Tea Party Garden, the home of the Mad Hatter and March Hare from the Alice in Wonderland film. And something kind of unique about this environment is that we can sit at any of these chairs at the unbirthday table and receive a special present. Now, here's the thing you want to remember. it is ideal to first sit in the plain wooden chairs, none of these cushioned ones, because if you sit in one of the more like comfortable armchairs, you will spawn a battle with some Heartless as opposed to the treasure you would get otherwise. But it looks like we can't actually sit down quite yet. Hold on, maybe I have to... Yeah, that's it, you have to interact with the sign twice in order to be able to sit down. Well, at any rate, let's go ahead and see what they have for us. And it's a standard cornucopia of, like, worthless little collectibles plus an elixir, something we'll definitely be needing. And we can just run the gamut of, like, the standard, little collectibles here. Oh, and a Happy New Year to you as well, Overlord. Thank you so much. I'm probably just gonna be staying in this evening, getting ready for the GRE. A whole lot of prep that goes into that, let me tell you. Alright, so they give you a dearth of these little, like, replenishment orbs for health and MP. But I don't really think they have any utility here, because I don't believe Heartless ever attack you in this location. Unless you do this. Oh, that chair didn't spawn Heartless. Well, it must be these two. My mistake. There we go. Overlord says they have friends coming over, like, just going to have some good food. That sounds perfect to me, my friend. A nice, low-key New Year's Eve. I've never been one for, like, the huge nightlife scene, but around here especially, like, this time of year, it gets crazy. Okay, so now we are in the bazaar room, but we are dancing on the ceiling, as it were. And if you notice, the Cheshire Cat said that the Heartless will be hiding in the darkness, in the shadows, so we have to cast aside the darkness by lighting these two lamps on the bazaar room's ceiling. And somehow that will scare the Heartless that has captured Alice out of hiding. And this is not at all simply intended to just pad out the runtime of this world's story chapter. No, not at all. So now we can actually see the large bodies in action a little bit more as soon as we clear out the Nocturnes. At least early on in the game, they tend to pair large bodies with the elemental mages. I think just because the intent is for you to focus on the large body, while the Nocturnes or their cousins, who we'll be introduced to in short order, kind of whittle you down from afar. And it's worth noting that there's 5 types of elemental mage Heartless in this game, and I would say the Nocturne is actually probably the most dangerous, if only because they have that slight tracking on the fireball. Okay, now that we've cleared out most of the Heartless in this room, we'll go ahead and light this first lamp. Only to be told that we need to light the second. So this is just a hint that we'll need to return to the bazaar room as we originally found it in order to face off with the final boss of the Wonderland story arc. Could not agree with you more, Overlord. It gets a little taxing, especially if you're like me and constantly having to prepare for the next phase of education or finals or something like that, on like the never-ending march to a PhD. Trust me, you learn to appreciate all of your downtime in seclusion. Okay, so by popping that latch, we were able to reach this hedge in the Queen's Court and receive, well, the first somewhat problematic treasure in the game. Now, what we got there was a Thundara G. The G suffix indicates that that item is a Gummi that can be attached to our ship, the Space Base. My issue with a lot of these wonderful little treasures that are hidden all around the worlds in the first Kingdom Hearts and designed to get you to explore, as I talked about on stream yesterday, is that the overwhelming majority of them in this game are just gummies, so they'll be seeing very little use in this playthrough. And it would have been nice to have either some new equipment or abilities or something like that squirreled away in just a few more of these little treasure coffers. Now, if we jump up on the table with a Cheshire Cat, we can initiate the final boss fight of Wonderland. But first, I want to examine this this plant that popped up out of the ground after we lit the first lamp, because it will give us yet more items. We are really stocking up on the healing items and also getting a fair amount of synthesis stuff pretty early on, which is always good and always important. Trust me, the more synthesis stuff you get early on in the game, the less you'll have to go back and just grind your ass off later in the game. Oh, and it's time we meet some of my favorite Heartless, the white mushrooms. Now, these guys have a random chance of spawning anytime you enter certain areas, and they will not attack you. Instead, they just want to play a simple game of charades. So what we have to do is wait for them to mime certain actions, and then hit them with magic that is appropriate to the gesture they're making. So, when the mushroom started fanning itself as if it was hot, we hit it with blizzard. When it started shivering, we hit it with fire, and so on. Now, the animation where it droops its head and a light hangs, that one right there, requires a spell we do not have quite yet. So we have to wait for it to shiver or overheat again. Fire! There we go. And by correctly completing the mushroom's little task 3 times, or by hitting it with the correct spell 3 times, we will receive typically a special synthesis item. But now, watch. Hopefully we can get it in time. But if you manage to hit the mushroom 3 times correctly with the same spell, you will receive a special synthesis item in addition to a bit more experience. In this case, it should be one of the arts items. In this case, the fire arts. These are very useful late-game synthesis items, and there is one of them for every single magic spell in the game, so like I said, just easier to get in on the ground floor for a lot of these. Now, the next thing we want to do, if I recall, is open up yet another path to the Bazaar Room by, for a 3rd time now, giving a potion to this flower so that it will enable us to reach giant size, allowing us to punt this boulder into the pond and raise these lily pads, giving us access, finally, to the little enclosure on the other side there. Go ahead and knock this down, rotate that, and shrink. Now, I'm not sure if we can access what's on the other side of that tree yet, but we'll see. And it's also worth noting that every time you grow or shrink in the Lotus Forest, you're technically instancing out to another variation of the same map. Obviously, the mushrooms aren't here any longer. So we loaded back into the standard variation of the map, which is fine by me. I mean, we need more experience from beating on these like Jobber Heartless anyway.
Come on!
You may or may not hear like furious X button mashing, which is essentially the Kingdom Hearts series theme at this point. If so, I apologize for that. We're actually making really good progress for this early on in the game. Wonderland, as I said yesterday, is probably going to take us a little longer than many of the other early worlds will, just because there's so much to explore here. For instance, this alternate pathway to the Bazaar Room. Now it's worth noting that for some elemental Heartless, if you dispatch them or even just hit them with a spell of the opposite alignment, you gain a couple tech points. I really like the idea of tech points, and I wish that future Kingdom Hearts titles would have kept them as a key part of the gameplay system, but unfortunately, they generally do not.
Come on!
One thing that's always made this series a bit difficult to critically analyze is the fact that with every entry they seem to totally revamp the way things like character progression and development seems to work. Which is very interesting, I think, but some form of stasis or familiarity would be appreciated, especially when you get into things like 3D's rather confusing character progression and ability system. I myself like the simple idea of leveling up, gaining new abilities or kit that you can use, and just leaving it at that. But Nomura got very, very creative with some of these spin-off titles' progression systems. Now you'll notice we picked up an item there called, I believe it was a defense up. Now we can use this from the menu to permanently increase the defense of one of our characters by 1. In this case, it's going to go to Sora. You can find various permanent upgrade items throughout your journey for things like attack and ability points, and there is no reason why any of those should ever go to Donald or Goofy. Because if Sora dies, the game's over, and Sora's kind of the only effectual combatant we have to begin with. Now you'll see, since last we checked in with the menu screen, we got 2 more AP, allowing us to re-equip Slapshot, and what the hell, we'll go ahead and equip Berserk as well. Donald, quite fittingly for him, unlocked Berserk. We'll equip it because he has nothing better at the moment, but he's so damn fragile I don't think it's really going to make much of a difference in the end. And Goofy received a very, very useful ability right here. He is going to equip Jackpot straight away, and this will allow us to receive more money and MP balls during combat. Yeah, that's kind of cool, but especially important is additional HP balls in combat. Great for this early phase of the game where we don't really have any source of consistent healing. Now, by falling straight through that platform, we arrive in this area of the Lotus Garden, or the Lotus Forest. As we can see here, there is a white Trinity mark on the ground that we'll have to come back much later in the game to access, and some flowers we can't quite interact with yet, because they need to be electrocuted. But there are a couple flowers here we'll go ahead and interact with, just for the heck of it,
This should help.
to see what they have to offer us. In exchange for a potion, see, that one gave us a high potion. And for an elixir, a precious rare elixir I'm just throwing away, this one gave us a mithril shard, which is a fair trade, I suppose. Okay, Overlord says they were never that good at this game, just completed it and then got shat on by Chain of Memories. I know how that feels, my friend. Chain of Memories, especially the original for GBA, was so different from this game, not just in how the mechanics worked, but also kind of how they paced it and character progression, that it was rather difficult for me my first time through as well. I was never that big a fan of the card-based mechanics, not because I don't love a good collectible card battle game, I absolutely do, but because they tried to integrate it into the extant Kingdom Hearts combat formula. So you're supposed to be running around and dodging attacks while strategically combining cards with the other hand on the opposite side of the controller. And I just always found that a very awkward experience. But I digress.
Deep freeze!
As I said, we're going to be eliminating pretty much any Heartless we run into early game, especially because we need the extra EXP. And as I said earlier, since we raised those lily pads, we can access yet another variation of the Bazaar Room. After we clean house, of course.
See ya!
Oh, I love Kingdom Hearts 1's Blizzard.
Come on!
Now, it will be a common theme throughout this playthrough to be constantly hearing Donald and Goofy screaming in pain in the background. Regrettably, their AI isn't that bright, and they have a tendency to just kind of get destroyed in head-on combat. Speaking of which, that was the large body's signature move, this kind of... well, I can't really say belly flop, just kind of a ram rush that it'll do at, or execute at mid-health or below, I believe. It's really easily telegraphed and blocked, though, as long as you're able to swing into the large body in time. Once we unlock a block ability, yes, something you actually have to unlock in this game, that attack will be completely trivialized. We have a nice trinity here before we move onward that will give us... that could be an accessory? No, just another camping set. Oh, but speaking of accessories, I think we did get one earlier. Let's have a look. One more protect chain. Now, I could give this to Goofy, but as a knight, his specialty is defense to begin with. So instead, we're going to give this one to Donald as well, allowing him to double up and hopefully get a decent amount of bulk for the upcoming boss fight. Now, this deposits us in the Queen's Garden of all places, where we can find some additional Dalmatians. And I believe, I could be wrong on this, but I believe we will have access to a different variation of the Bazaar Room from these other portals in the Lotus Forest, now that we've lit both lamps. I'm not sure about that, but I think that's what happens. Like the portals we used to access the evidence earlier will be changed to deposit us elsewhere in the world. Like so. Now we're on the wall. Because why not? Now our big task here, if I remember correctly, is going to be turning on that spigot, which will somehow allow us to raise this urn out of the ground.
Come on!
Just barely got that one in time.
Come on!
One of the trickier things about Kingdom Hearts' combat system is that you really have to commit to a lot of attacks. There's a pretty significant recovery time for a lot of them.
Come on!
So you can see large bodies just explode into prizes when they're vanquished, which is both satisfying and extremely helpful. Now that we're over here, we can actually drop down these shutters to be teleported once again to the Lotus Forest, which is not where I wanted to end up, so let's try that once more. Oh, that's it, we just interact with the spigot, and there we go. And now that we have realized the urn, we can head right back to the Queen's Castle through it, because Alice in Wonderland, and receive a totally useless Gummi as compensation. Lovely, lovely. Now I'm going to go giant one last time just so we can access that portal in the tree to see if it leads elsewhere now.
Here!
typically I'd be rather cross with myself for having to grow and shrink so many times, but all it requires is a potion, which are a dime a dozen in this game. So I never hear much about Wonderland's OST from, like, Kingdom Hearts fans, but I think it's rather pleasant and fitting for this, like, psychedelic Victorian fairy tale. It's kind of pleasant and whimsical, which stands in stark contrast to the themes of the world we'll be heading to next, which are incredibly bombastic and dynamic.
Come on! See ya!
Epic, I suppose, would be the best word. Now this is what makes the Nocturnes a bit of a pain early on. They're extremely maneuverable, and at least in the early game, Sora is not. They shoot homing projectiles, and the only homing projectile we have is one they are completely immune to. You'll forgive me if we take a bit of time just kind of cleaning up loose ends in Wonderland today. It's just kind of the nature of this world. There's a lot to do. Now, wait a moment, there's one more series of shutters I think we can go explore. It was on the same wall of the bazaar room as was the that portrait, the painting. So that means, you guessed it, I'm going to have to burn like a 5th potion now to grow and shrink once more. You know, I'm starting to recognize, as I attempt to get used to streaming, much more difficult than it actually looks to competently play a game while you talk over it.
Here!
This requires a phenomenal amount of concentration and multitasking. This is a young man's game. At 21, I just don't know, like, I'm not too wizened for it. Alright. Now that we can actually access that face of the bazaar room once more, time to head back over there, fall through the shutters, and probably just end up right back at square one. But we'll see. Now, it's very important to remember that white trinity we saw on the other side of the alcove by the pond, because that's actually how we're going to get this world's unique weapon. See, a common theme in Kingdom Hearts is that every world, every locale, has at least one special keychain associated with it. And it's typical standard practice for Sora to acquire his new keychain for a world after he completes its main storyline. But Kingdom Hearts 1, having not really established a rhythm for the series beforehand, obviously, deviates from this in a couple of places. And Wonderland is one just such occasion. Oh, and again, we just end up right back over here, so I guess we have explored all we can in Wonderland this go-round. Alright. No, wait, I'm so sorry, y'all, we have not, actually. There's one more thing we need to do, and it's actually quite important later on. And we did it accidentally. I'm so good at my job. Okay, do you see that little teddy bear in the armchair down there? Well, originally, it would have been supported up on a shelf on this wall, this little shelf right here. But I suppose in my furious X-mashing combat with the Heartless, I accidentally busted its hinges and dropped it into the chair, which is exactly where we want it to be. Because it is going to allow us to, you guessed it, explore yet more of the bazaar room later on. we're gonna be living in here for a while, is what I'm trying to say. But actually now we are ready to go back to the standard Bazaar Room. And I think, since we are going to have to grow in order to interact with the teddy bear, it's going to be time for us to fight the main boss of Wonderland. Exciting stuff. And if any of you out there watching this on stream or on demand are familiar with this game at all, you will know the Wonderland boss. It's actually become one of the more notable Heartless bosses. Oh, we don't have to fight it just yet, but I'll carry on talking anyway. Despite the fact that Wonderland itself hasn't appeared in very many main series games at all, well, just this one, really, and has then appeared in a couple of the side games. Was it in 368 Days? Yes, it was. And it was in Recoded. But this boss seems to make appearances anytime Wonderland does, and even in a couple projects where it doesn't. And you'll see, moving that clock aside, which sprung out of the wall after we moved the teddy bear over because Wonderland, opened up, I believe, the balcony on the Tea Party Garden, which contains dark matter, a very rare synthesis item that will be of import to some late-game projects. So, with that taken care of, we are finally, actually, done with Wonderland for now. As I said, we'll have to come back to get the Keyblade a bit later on, and maybe pick up a couple spare treasures in, like, just a housekeeping stream, but that will be it for now. Now it's time to go face the infamous boss of Wonderland. So we got a magic boost with this level, nothing too significant for us right now, but also the tech boost ability, which will increase, I believe, the amount of tech points you earn from reflecting or blocking certain enemy attacks. It can be useful this early on, but right now our combat abilities are just a bit too useful. There we go. Now, it is a very good thing that we were able to earn Blizzard by finding all of the evidence that implicated the Heartless as the assailants in the Queen's trial, because doing so allowed us to earn the Blizzard magic spell much earlier than we would have otherwise. See, if you don't collect at least the piece of evidence that's up there next to the oven, you would earn the Blizzard spell after this fight, when, depending on how well you do, how quickly you're able to wear the boss down, would be a very bad thing, as the Blizzard spell becomes essential at a certain phase of the fight. Here we go! Ladies and gentlemen, meet the Trick Master, one of my favorite bosses from the original Kingdom Hearts in terms of sheer design alone. I love how it resembles a child's papercraft doll. And with that said, welcome to the Trick Master boss fight. I'm so sorry to be pausing the game at the intro of these boss fights to give you a little background. Let me know in chat or the comments of the VOD if you find this irritating or feel it breaks flow, and I'll do my best to transition into just providing this info during the fight. Now, Trick Master is a really tough dude at this stage in the game, largely due to his phenomenal height. See, he can only be damaged in the torso, or especially the heads. His prodigious legs are totally invulnerable to all damage, so you have to make use of the various elevated surfaces in the Bazaar Room in order to actually get an attack in on him. The good news is he's relatively fragile, and after a couple combos to the dome, he will collapse to the ground and give you a couple totally free combos. The bad news is he also will keep you on your toes as you move about the arena. At this stage, he can only really damage you by swiping with his batons. He usually uses a simple 2-hit combo, I believe, just a left-right sweep, whether you were on an elevated surface or down along the ground. And these are fairly damaging, but also quite easy to avoid usually, unless he happens to swat you out of the air as you're jumping towards him. Something that has definitely never happened to me, and will not, because I am using pure pro strats for this playthrough. Now, the Trickmaster, being modeled on, like, carnival juggling acts, will, as his HP gets lower and lower over the course of the fight, attempt to ignite his batons on the stovetop on the other side of the bizarre room. And should he do this, not only will his standard melee attacks be buffed for the duration of the fight, but he also gains access to probably one of the most annoying attacks at this phase in the game, wherein he will touch, I believe, one of his hands or his right baton to the left and start clicking them together, sending extremely fast-moving, homing fireballs toward you with every click. And he will send out a fairly large salvo of these at a time. It can be extremely damaging and just wear Sora down. You don't want to give him the opportunity to do this, which is why we acquired the Blizzard magic earlier. Should he ignite his batons and attempt this type of attack, we can hit the batons themselves with Blizzard magic a couple of times to extinguish them, I believe. I know I've done it before, but I don't know if you have to hit the Trickmaster or the batons. I would assume the latter. That's everything we need to know for this boss fight. Now let's see if we can pull it off. Should be able to. That was its standard melee combo, kind of ungainly, as you would expect. And it's that easy to stun it. God, I just love this thing's design, from the spindly legs to the kind of bizarre, guillotine blade-looking feet. It's a really cool design and shows what Hammer and his team are capable of when they're working specifically with, like, inhuman base designs. Just there we saw his last trick I've yet to mention. If you come to rely too much on the dinette set right here in the middle of the room, the Trickmaster can smash either the table or the chair, removing them from the fight temporarily. And also, while it sings, if indeed that's what it's doing, it will cause the table to rotate. I'm not entirely sure why that's supposed to be such a hindrance or change the game that much, but there you go. And a quick word of caution. Under no circumstances, no matter how desperate you are for damage, use fire in this fight. Because if you accidentally connect with one of the batons instead of the Trickmaster, you will ignite its batons for it. I thought it was going to light up, but, well, now it is. Joy. Okay, kids, this is where it gets a little tricky. Come here. As the fight goes on, I believe it gets a little more difficult to actually... oh god, here it comes. So it's relatively easy to avert the flame salvo attack if you just get in close and stay there. But if there's any distance at all between you and the Trickmaster, things can become kind of difficult really quickly.
Come on!
Okay, so you cannot target the batons. For some reason I thought you could. No matter, at this stage, it looks like we kind of got him on the ropes. Oh, the batons extinguish themselves automatically. Would you look at that?
Deep freeze! Deep freeze!
And off it goes to do what it does best. But we've got our table back, which is the most important thing. Hopefully allowing us to finish this fight in short order. And there we go. There it is. We just stay around the feet and, like, sort of try to stick and move where possible. We can make it out of this. Trickmaster has quite a bit of health for this early on in the game. I don't even think the bosses of the next world will take quite as long to wear down. One of them will have more health, but it isn't quite so difficult to render vulnerable. And with that, we have brought down the Trickmaster and officially cleared the Wonderland story chapter. Fantastic. Such a beautiful papier-mâché boy taken from us too soon. But not to worry, we'll be seeing it again and again and again over the course of the series. And we obtained the Ifrit horn accessory, which is pretty useful at this point in the game.
What a racket. How's a doorknob to get any sleep?
And disturbing implications aside, we have just seen the primary story function of the Keyblade aside from defeating Heartless. The Keyblade is actually able to lock keyholes, the metaphysical representations of the connections between worlds, and by so doing, supposedly seal the Heartless off, or at least prevent them from launching a full-scale invasion. This primarily serves a story purpose, as even after locking a world's keyhole, we will still find Heartless just crawling all about the place. Sometimes even more than we would otherwise. So, unfortunately, despite our fantastic victory over the Trickmaster, the Heartless were able to abscond with Alice, meaning our wonderful heroes, ladies and gentlemen, effectively did nothing at all in this world. They didn't assist the protagonists, they got into a fight with the antagonist that didn't move the story forward whatsoever, they destroyed a circus attraction, and that was kind of it. This is kind of one of the more significant complaints that's levied against the writing in the first Kingdom Hearts game, that being, our heroes don't really seem to have any impact on the plots of the worlds themselves, and I'd say this is a legitimate criticism, but trust me, compared to some of the issues we're going to get into with this series writing later on, that should be the least of our worries right now. Now, having completed the Wonderland story arc, we now see that we have access to a brand new world. This world has a battle level of 3, making it more difficult, more challenging, and supposedly advised for players to visit after they've completed this one, but at present, we would need to take the Gummi ship back to Traverse Town, straight over to this world, and over here, creating, I believe, 2 additional, totally unnecessary Gummi ship trips we would have to take, and so it's not worth my time. I know I'm tough enough, we got the right stuff, we got the strats, we got the gear. We're going for the Battle Level 3 world because I don't want to have to put up with any more Gummi ship than I absolutely need to. This world is going to be a lot of fun for us to break down aesthetically. I think it's one of the more beautiful worlds in the first game, or at least it certainly was when the game first came out. And keep in mind, even though this is an HD remaster, this game still looks beautiful despite its age. And I think a lot of that can be attributed just to the collaboration between Square Enix, one of the developers slash publishers best known for their phenomenal aesthetic direction, and of course the absolute masterminds at Walt Disney Studios or Interactive. I mean, with a team like that, you really can't lose when it comes to visual or sound design. So this is kind of how the Gummi ship's gonna work for the rest of the game. We're just going to be flying along in a blank, featureless void, shooting at objects that look like they were rendered in Reboot, the classic 90s cartoon. and just holding down the fire button, because there's no penalty for overheating your laser or anything like that. And I don't care, so we're just going to ride this out. Well, I'm certainly not a fan of this game's Gummi ship sequences, if y'all couldn't tell that already. I don't want to hang too fine a point on it, because as I said, they really did try to make these sections as deep and involved as they could. There's so much to the actual Gummi building system that I feel like it's a laudable effort, at least. For instance, if you destroy enough of these enemy ships instead of random gummies, there's a chance that they'll actually drop the blueprint for that type of ship, so that if you have enough parts, you could recreate and pilot it yourself, which I think is a really nice touch. But that said, our short Gummi nightmare is over once again. As our heroes begin bickering over whether or not the king could be in this world. So, no chance that our friends could be in, like, the vast unexplored jungle, but they might be in the, like, hallucinogen-inspired, like, nightmare world? I guess? No, of course, this is really just here, this entire conversation, to provide rationale for a petty argument between immature boy and immature duck that is going to last all of an entire world's plotline. After this, none of this will ever be brought up again, and Sora, Donald, and Goofy will always act like the best of friends. / errant, vacuous child with anthropomorphic barnyard guardians. And we'll never have to deal with it again. Yes, if you couldn't guess just from looking at the overworld, this world, the Deep Jungle, is actually based off of Edgar Rice Burroughs' Tarzan. Disney's film adaptation of it was one of my favorite movies when I was a very small child.
Goofy?
And I love seeing it here. And we just get right into the action before we even get the world's title card, with a fight versus Sabor. Okay, now, I wish I could give you strats for Sabor, but there is really nothing to this fight. Nothing at all. Sabor is a leopard, and at least I think so. And fights like one, at that. It's just going to be jumping at you, clawing, scratching. All you've really got to do is just keep her locked in a combo, because she constantly staggers, and every combo finisher sends her flying. There's not really any chance that you could lose this fight, so just have fun with it. And enjoy the awesome Deep Jungle combat music.
Come on! Come on!
And it's over just like that. No muss, no fuss. And now we're introduced to Tarzan, who holds a very special significance in the overall Kingdom Hearts gameplay canon. And we'll see what that is in just a moment.
Danger.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What is this place?
This place.
Okay. Where did the others go? Look, I got separated from my friends. Have you seen them?
Hmm?
Friends.
Friends.
Right, my friends. There's two of them. The loud one is
I have an idea this is exactly what, like, the script writing sessions for this game were like.
You know what? Never mind. I'm looking for my friends, Riku and Kairi.
Friends? Friends.
For
Heart.
Riku.
Darkness.
Right.
Memory.
Kairi.
Friends.
Friends.
Right.
Oh, friends, here.
Really? Huh?
Friends, here.
Not sure I understand, but show me. Take me to Riku and Kairi.
Tarzan. Tarzan, go.
And I'm Sora. Tarzan go, Sora go.
Oh my god. Okay, so we're just going to act like that cutscene never happened and introduce ourselves properly to the deep jungle. A beautiful and expansive world that was really imaginatively designed, but unfortunately,
Where are we?
it seems like the actual, like,
I sure
level or gameplay design team didn't quite know exactly what to do with this, as we'll see throughout probably the rest of today's streams.
Who needs them? They can run the game without them, huh?
This is a pretty great little scene.
Whoa.
And yes, Turk just crapped out a Gummi that is going to end up being a significant plot point, because certain elements of this game's script were literally pulled out of something's ass. I had to go for the easy joke, I'm sorry. And yes, here we go. Tarzan's significance to the gameplay canon is this right here. He is our first guest party member. Now, it is common practice in the Kingdom Hearts series, or, well, at least the mainline series, to have certain characters, typically the protagonists from the properties whose worlds you're exploring, temporarily join the party while you are present there. Now, typically, just to show these guys off, at least in this playthrough, they will be temporarily taking Goofy's place for at least part of our exploration of each world. Weak as Donald is, he's fairly invaluable for his healing and damage-dealing potential. Now that Tarzan is technically with us, although not represented on air, on screen, he will be able to support us in combat, and you will see very quickly what an absolute monster he is in combat. Unlike the dynamic duo, our NPC-controlled allies who are world-specific tend to be pretty powerful, and it might just be me, but I think they have slightly more intelligent AI as well. It's good to know I was not the only person wanting to make the plot pulled out of somebody's ass joke. That would be the only opportunity the series provides us, believe it or not. Now, just by jumping off of the treehouse canopy, we can drop down to this area, the tunnel, which has a little bit more treasure for us, as well as this little connecting area, the treetop. And I know it's very difficult to make out, but there is actually a pretty well-hidden green trinity here in the canopy that we will be coming back for just a bit later on. Now, Deep Jungle, beautiful as it is, also tends to be a little content sparse, with this being the most significant part of its early gameplay. This little, like, basically Mario 64 slide minigame. And if you know anything about Kingdom Hearts, you will know this series loves its minigames. And a lot of them are pretty hit or miss. This one, though, is alright. You can actually come back after you've completed the main story for the Deep Jungle chapter and play a full, like, legitimate minigame with prizes and the like, wherein you have to collect a certain amount of fruits or complete other objectives as you slide along that course, and you can open up something like a half-dozen different courses. Blue Trinity, as soon as we reunite with our friends, we'll be able to use that. And just to get it out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and collect these odd little projector slides you see strewn all about the camp. Because we're about to be sent on a fetch quest for them anyway, might as well get it while the getting's good. This camp is a fairly interesting little area, in that there are a variety of note cards scattered all about, specifically recipe cards and experiment cards, which just allow you to carry out some very basic interaction with the environment in order to produce mid-level healing items. Not really something we're going to be needing. As you can see here, there's a cute little Beauty and the Beast cameo. Technically Mrs. Potts in the family, I suppose. Not creepy at all that they're being used as literal drinking ware. And I think we may have all the slides already. Let's double check. No, we need slide 2, which is somewhere about here. Let's have a look-see. Here it is, atop the chest of drawers. Okay. Now we're good to get just a bit more exposition with the rest of the principal cast from Tarzan.
Jane.
Many of whom, I believe, are voiced by their original voice actors.
Oh, and who's this?
Hi
Including
there.
one glorious character in
You
particular.
speak English. So then, obviously you're not related to Tarzan. Are you here to study the gorillas?
Highly doubtful.
And this would be him. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the
Goofy,
incredibly
Donald.
well-known and respected British actor, my mistake,
A circus of clowns.
Mr. Brian
Not
Blessed,
much use for
who
hunting
provided
gorillas.
the original, extremely
Mr.
bombastic
Clayton,
voice for
we're
Clayton
studying
in
them,
the
not
Tarzan
hunting them.
animated
This
film,
is
and
research.
incredibly, who was able to return
Well,
to record
the more the merrier.
voiceover
Do
for the
make
same
yourselves at
character
home.
in Kingdom Hearts. Easily the most impressive
Well, anyway,
reacquisition
I'm
of talent that
saying-
Square Enix made, I would say.
Sora, look what we found. Look at this.
Don't just carry that in your hands, Goofy, come on. I was talking about Brian Blessed, and I was all excited, and then you've got to pull, like, monkey shit out of your back pocket. Come on, man, just don't ruin the mood. Oh! Oh, this is what our ship is made out of. Well, the jokes kind of make themselves at this point, doesn't it? Or don't they? Oh, we're still at each other's throats, and from this point on, I believe that plot point will never be referenced again. So, while I said we would show off Tarzan, and indeed we will later on, right now it's kind of important that we have the full party together so we can grab a trinity or two. Really quickly, we could talk to Jane to get a bit more direction. So, yes, we have to show Tarzan the slides we found scattered around the camp to see if any of them contain information that he would recognize, which may lead us to the location of our friends, who are definitely here in, like, the middle of the African rainforest, and not anywhere else. This slide actually has plot significance, so keep that image in your head, if you please. And we have irritating courtship, and bizarre child rearing, gorilla, ship of the line, and terrible fencing form, and that'll do it.
Well, Tarzan?
Where are my friends, Riku and Kairi? Hey, I thought...
That leaves just one place. Young man, We've been in this jungle for some time now. But we have yet to encounter these friends of yours. I'd wager they're with the gorillas, but Tarzan refuses to take us to them.
Really, Mr. Clayton? Tarzan
I
wouldn't
love
like-
his facial
Then take
expression.
us there. Take us to the gorillas. Gorillas.